Deliver Us Mars runs into an artistic problem that is unique to the video game medium. A problem where a good story does not always equate into a good game. See, in most artistic mediums, a good story is the indicator of a good movie, TV show, book, or play more often than not. After all, these mediums are driven by narrative in the same way that I'm driven by cheeseburgers, because with both, it's a clear sign we're in for a good time. But video games are different. As an interactive medium, gaming requires qualities beyond that of a riveting story in order to be good. While sure, a great narrative can really enhance a given title and make it memorable, the interactive element is key, because the way in which a player affects any given interactive world and its story can complement the overall narrative. For a few examples, the combat in The Last of Us games are grueling, and the interactive element makes the player complicit in this dark, violent world. Much like how me buying Chicago Bears merchandise, despite decades of franchise futility, makes me complicit as to why the Chicago Bears still suck. And then there's a game like Life is Strange, a title that is almost entirely story-driven and has no combat to speak of, yet still has important interactive elements where the playable character can investigate potential crimes and suspicious figures, make decisions that affect the direction of the story, and can even rewind time to try and make the best decision possible. Because despite firstly and foremostly being about narrative, Life is Strange's interactive elements strengthen the story and the player's connection to it. That's why it's a really good game. Yet what happens when a game has a very well-written narrative, while its actual gameplay is lacking? What happens when a title's story is good, but its interactive elements fall flat? Well, then you have the very predicament that Deliver Us Mars is in. See, Deliver Us Mars has a good story. This Keoken Interactive developed game and sequel to their 2019 title Deliver Us the Moon has a really terrific science fiction story about a futuristic Earth that is on death's doorstep due to climate change, and how a very intelligent young adult and straight-A student named Kathy, alongside 3 others, venture forth into space in search for Kathy's father Isaac, who had previously stolen crucial technology meant to save the Earth from its impending climate apocalypse and fucked all the way off to Mars and start a colony years prior, thus abandoning Kathy back when she was a young girl. And this is already a fascinating idea for a story, because not only is the climate change and the imminent doom of Earth's geological decline relatable, but the strong story establishes an emotional connection with the player due to how it portrays Kathy and her absent father Isaac. After all, Kathy is very sympathetic. She still sees her father with childlike rose-tinted glasses. He is her hero. But of course, that's not the reality, and Deliver Us Mars presents an emotional narrative about how a young woman processes the undeniable realization that her father is imperfect, that he is just a man rather than a superhero. The realization that he is not Superman, but is instead Bizarro. And as a result of this terrific character development, Deliver Us Mars has a great narrative foundation that drives the game as a whole. It has quality storytelling. Yet unfortunately, Deliver Us Mars gameplay does not reciprocate on these narrative highs. In fact, the opposite is true. The gameplay detracts from the overall experience. Many of its puzzles are unintuitive, save for a few that require Kathy to hook up cable-less stream tech to power sources. The pickaxe climbing sequences are really clunky and overcomplicated, given that you need to slowly use both triggers to lodge your pickaxes into place. Movement and jumping feels floaty, even when not in literal fucking space. And there's a lot of unused empty space in the level design that does not really encourage the player to explore any of the game's environments. Sure, there are some collectibles and lore details that the player can uncover, but even with that said, a lot of this game feels empty. Like, a lot of the levels are spacious, but offer little to no reason to actually explore those said aforementioned spaces. And yes, I know Deliver Us Mars' design is linear, but linear games can still entice players into exploring them. There's still reasons as to why the player should look into the nooks and crannies of a given game's world. Yet sadly, with Deliver Us Mars, a lot of the levels aren't designed in such a way. They don't feature many reasons for the player to tread off the beaten path. It's an issue, and one of many. And with all of these gameplay problems combined, Deliver Us Mars just is not a fun game. Sure, it may have a good story, but the act of playing it is not enjoyable. The mostly simplistic puzzles, the overdone climbing mechanics, the off-touch platforming, and the emptiness of the level design just do not befit a grand, epic science fiction adventure. If anything, the game feels like a chore and one that players have to suffer through in order to see the conclusion to a well-written story. It is a hassle. Additionally, Deliver Us Mars has technical issues as well. For one thing, I had to close the game software every time I was done with a play session, because if I resumed playing after initially putting my console on low power mode, I'd be resuming into a game with no audio video, save for the background music. Quickly moving the camera around causes some of the environment to disappear for a second or two. Interacting with the environment can be irritating due to how sometimes you have to stand in a very specific spot in order to do that said interacting. And I even had to restart a chapter one time because the game couldn't allow me to progress in one specific area, which kinda sucked. And with that, these are all problems. And all these issues combined make for a game that does not perform all that well. If anything, Deliver Us Mars needs the game development equivalent of a Viagra, and a high dose at that. And look, I understand that Deliver Us Mars is a small game by a small development team. I get that I have to have different expectations compared to a big budget game from a AAA publisher. But with that said, I still think a game has to perform well. A game still shouldn't have these types of problems that make the act of playing it such a pain in the ass. It should not perform so subpar. And ultimately, those words, subpar, perfectly describes the quality of Deliver Us Mars's gameplay. When combining the act of actually playing the game and the technical faults, the gameplay's below average quality fails Deliver Us Mars's lofty narrative aspirations, causing it to be an overall unsatisfactory experience. Even though yes, it's a short 5.5 to 6 hour game, meaning that many gamers may ultimately decide to endure the gameplay slog in order to experience the narrative, there's just little in the way of meaningful or rewarding gameplay content here. Because while Deliver Us Mars has a good story, it's also just a plain old bad game. It's overall far from the realm of good. It does not fulfill the promise of its narrative, and ultimately Deliver Us Mars fails to deliver here. And with that, that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and leave a comment telling me what you think of Deliver Us Mars. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. $1 a month gets you onto this credit sequence, and $5 a month allows you to make quick review requests. The link to my Patreon is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, particularly my high tier ones in Samantha Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.